background of this particular movement. Now, when we talk on this scenario, the year of 1919, it saw a strong feeling of discontent among all the sections of Indians because of various reasons. Why? The economic situation of the country in the post-war years had become alarming, with the rise in the prices of commodities, decrease in production of Indian industries, increase in the burden of taxes and rents. Almost all sections of the society suffered economic hardships due to the war, and this strengthened the anti-British attitude. So this is the after war effect. This is the after war effect, wherein there was rise in inflation, rise in poverty, rise in non accessibility to goods, and also the Britishers had spent a lot of money in the war, so obviously they would want that money to be recouped. So they started taxing the Indians more. But the Indians did not have money because they had already, because there was no economic growth at that point of time during the war years. So they had no money and they were yet taxed more. That is again going to increase the anti-British feeling, okay, for the British. Moreover, the Rowlatt Act, the imposition of martial law in Punjab and the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre exposed the brutal and uncivilized face of the foreign rule in India. This was one another aspect. And then the Hunter Commission, which was set up to look into the Punjab atrocities, it proved to be a eyewash. In fact, the House of Lords of the British Parliament endorsed General Dyer's actions, and the British public showed solidarity with General Dyer by helping the Morning Post collect 30,000 pounds for him. Just look at the money that is there. So, for a person who did a genocide, this was done. Then the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, also known as the Montfort reforms, the name is of the secretary and the viceroy. Here they were the Montfort reforms, with their ill-conceived scheme of diarchy, failed to satisfy the rising demand of Indians for the self-government. So here the Montfort reforms had started something that was known as the diarchy. Okay, diarchy. Now, when we talk on the diarchy, my dear friends, what do we understand on the diarchy? What can we understand from the diarchy? Let me just explain this thing to you. So, when I am talking about diarchy, the first aspect is that what is diarchy? What is the meaning of diarchy? So the meaning of diarchy, when I tell you this, the meaning of diarchy is that it is dual rule, okay, or it can also be known as dual government. Now, what in India under the British rule, there were two times that we can understand that there is going to be, means there were three times generally when we can understand that there was dual rule and dual government in India. So, three times. When we talk about those the three times they are going to be generally the first time, okay, for the first time, it was during the time period of 1765 till 1772, and during this point of time there was Robert Clive, who had brought in the diarchy system in the area of Bengal. In the area of Bengal, that is the dual system of government. Okay, so that was the dual rule aspect, and this was associated with the Diwani and Nizamat. Diwani and Nizamat. So the dual system to rule the country means the area. The first one was by Robert Clive. Then when we talk about the second time period, so the second time period, it was brought in by the various Charter Act, and as per the Charter Act there was two entities of the British India to govern India. All right, and that is going to be the Board of Control. All right, Board of Control means, you might remember the political functions and the commercial functions that is going to be there at that point of time. So those were the two offices that was created, one for the political office and one for the commercial activities of the British East India Company. So that was one aspect of dual government. And finally, when we talk about the third aspect, so the third aspect, it is going to be associated with the system of diarchy that was introduced. And diarchy was also a dual system of government. Now the diarchy, the dual system of government, what it meant is that here we can also divide it into two aspects. Okay, diarchy here. Just try to understand this concept. So when I talk about the diarchy, what can we understand is that I'll just tell it to you. I'll just tell you one aspect itself. Okay, so will not complicate things, but here this is going to be the aspect. So when we talk about diarchy, what can we understand here is that in the diarchy aspect, there is going to be the scenario that by the time period of the GOI Act 1919, okay, by the time period of GOI Act 1919, what can we understand is that here the government, it had basically, divided the governance of the country at two levels. The first one, it is going to be at the central level, and second one, it is going to be at the state level. Now what happened is that in the aspect of the state level, what was the scenario is that there was one governor. Okay, there was one governor general. Now what means one particular governor was there, and even at the central level there was the viceroy. Now there are generally two councils, okay, two councils of the governor. One is going to be the executive council and another is going to be the legislative council. When I'm talking to you, okay, so there is going to be, means you can just look at it that this was the general scenario that is going to be there at that point of time. Okay, that there is going to be the executive council and then there is going to be the legislative council. Now, in this legislative and executive council, what is the context here? It is said that in the legislative council there is going to be the people, means just correlated with the parliament of today's time period. In the parliament of today's time period, what is there? That there is going to be, one is going to be the executive. Okay, one is going to be the executive. Another, they are going to be the members of parliament. Okay, members of parliament, that means the just the legislature. Okay, the legislature. So the executive is basically the government, that is the BJP, for example, today, and in the legislature there is going to be the Congress. All right, so what happened is that here also there was that same thing. There was the executive council, there was the legislative council. Now in the legislative council, there was generally the people who after elections were sitting in the legislatures, and they were given the task of passing the laws. Okay, and when they were given the task of passing the they were given the task of passing the laws. And the executive, it is basically the viceroy and his council. Okay, so the executive, it is basically the viceroy and his council who is going to be implementing that laws. So that was there. But the question is that on what topics will the legislative council make the laws? So on the basis of topics, you can also correlate the today's time period, that you might know that in the Indian polity, there are various subjects. The various subjects, that means one is going to be central subject, then the state subject, and then the provincial subject. We know that this is a system that is there. Central subject, state subject, and provincial subject. In the central subject, the center can make the laws, state subject, state can make the laws, and in the provincial subject, provinces can make the laws. So that is the scenario. So here also, by as according to the Government of India Act 1919, the subjects, they were divided into two parts. One was known as the transferred subjects and another was known as the reserved subjects. Now the transferred subjects, they could be looked, whatever matters were written in the transferred subjects, they could be taken or looked by the popular ministers, and the popular ministers could also make laws in that. Whereas in the reserved subject, only the viceroy and his executive council could look into the matter. So in the legislative, in the legislative council, only the transferred subjects could be talked upon, whereas for the executive council, the reserved subjects could be talked upon. So this was the system of diarchy.